Welcome. We're so glad that you're here. This is a candidate forum, and we are incredibly pleased to have you all with us. I'm going to hand this off to Emily Cole from Ohio Families Unite for Political Action and Change. So there's a reason why they go by OFUPAC. And with that, Emily.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. If you're just hopping in, we would encourage you to sign in the chat box, just so our two candidates know who all is in the room. We're thrilled that you're here with us this evening. My name is Emily Cole. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of OFUPAC, which is the action fund of Ohio Families United Against Police Brutality, and we are so honored to put on this forum this evening. I want to thank our co-host, Ohio Fair Courts Alliance. I'd love to thank our co-sponsors, Equality Ohio, Pro-Choice Ohio, Faith in Public Life, Common Cause Ohio, the Ohio Environmental Council, and Campus Vote Project. And so with that, I'd love to turn it over to our moderator for the evening, Catherine Terser. Many of you know her as the Executive Director of Common Cause Ohio. And Catherine, thank you so much.
Hello all, and welcome to tonight's candidate forum. I'm just so pleased that both Judge Forbes and Judge Jamison were able to, to join us tonight. I think it's incredibly important that we actually hear directly from candidates. And before we really begin, I think it's important to take a moment and to think about why these Ohio Supreme Court races are so important. The Ohio Supreme Court, it impacts our daily lives. And so we need to think about things like utilities. How much utility rates are hiked? That's up to the Ohio Supreme Court. They make decisions about what happens with the ballot board, what happens with congressional and state legislative district maps. They make decisions about who actually gets executed. They make decisions about the constitutionality and of things like insurance laws. So one of the things I think is really important is that we hear directly from the judges. And so what I'm going to do is have the two judges. So there's Judge Lisa Forbes and Judge Terri Jamison. I'm going to ask them both to introduce themselves rather than me doing it. And for all of us, they basically are going to be given 2 to 3 minutes for every answer. And every once in a while, if you see a little yellow hand standing up, that's because they've hit time, and that'll encourage them to wrap it up. Once again, I am going to encourage you all to put your questions into the Q&A. And then when we get to 8:15, I'm going to take it, as opposed to me asking the questions, what's going to happen is it's going to be up to you. So Maria Bruno from Equality Ohio and Sabrina Jordan from OFUPAC are going to be the ones that are looking at that chat. We're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions, but we'll do our best. And once again, we're going to be sure to send you a recording. And with that, I would like to ask Judge Lisa Forbes to introduce herself, let us know a little bit about you and why you're interested in serving on the Ohio Supreme Court.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me here this evening. This is just an incredible demonstration of force of the power of Ohio voters. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to be here and talk with you all today, because I share, Catherine, I share your passion for the courts. So I am Judge Lisa Forbes. I'm on the 8th District Court of Appeals, and I'm running for the open seat on the Ohio Supreme Court so that I can do my part, to ensure that the Supreme Court is an effective firewall to protect our democracy and the rule of law. One of the things that I am concerned about is you hear legislators talking openly about trying to avoid implementing or working around enacted laws, the constitutional amendment that the citizens of Ohio overwhelmingly enacted. And that gives me concern for our democracy. When people speak, it is the legislator's job to do their will. So in asking for your support, and I am asking for your support because, as Catherine noted and Emily noted, voting has started. And I'm in asking for your support, I'd like to offer to you my expertise in the law, my commitment to our community, and my work ethic. My expertise in the law comes from the fact that I've been practicing law for some 30 years. 27 of those years I was in private practice. The majority of those years I was a partner in a national law firm headquartered in Columbus. I worked out of the Cleveland office. I handled complex, complicated legal matters. I use the skills I gained there every day now that I am a judge. For the last chapter of my career, I took a pivot and I turned to public service as my vocation as well as my extracurricular activities. And I haven't looked back. With regard to my commitment to the community, I am presently the chair of a board. I've been involved in the organization. It's a human services organization in Cuyahoga County for the better part of better than 15 years. And we provide high quality Head Start, job training, and healthcare services to some of my community's most vulnerable residents. And when I say some, I mean 15 to 20,000 citizens every year benefit from the services. I also, election after election, have volunteered with the voter protection program to ensure that everyone who's registered to vote can cast a ballot and have it count. My work ethic, I give I got that from my grandparents, and I will bring my work ethic to bear, working for the citizens of Ohio every day. So I ask for your support, and I look forward to this evening's conversation.
Well, thank you, Judge Forbes. So now the next batter up is Judge Terri Jamison. We're so glad you're here, and we'd look forward to learning a little bit about you and why you're running for the Ohio Supreme Court.
Well,
and
thank you so
Judge
much.
Jamison.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that is here today. I am Judge Terri Jamison. I originally hail from West Virginia. My early career began in social work, where I was an eligibility worker, a daycare provider trainer, and a fraud investigator. After working for welfare for a number of years, I then, after the law passed, became one of the first women to work in the underground coal mines, and am a proud former member of United Mine Workers of America. I've been a trailblazer in my life, and that's really important, and the law impacted that opportunity for me to go into be an underground coal miner. But we know that there was a downturn in the economy and coal mines began to close. And that's when I moved to Ohio over 40 years ago. I came here with a dream that I would be able to start over and start a new career. I landed in the insurance industry, owned and operated my own insurance agency for more than 16 years. And while working full-time and being a single parent, I went to Franklin University and obtained my Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Human Resources Management with a minor from Franklin University. I then ran into another contract issue with Allstate Insurance, where they terminated all of the current contracts that we had, and I decided to make the change into Capital University Law School to start another career. So I've been impacted personally by the law, and that's one reason that I'm running for the Supreme Court. When you've had these personal impacts in your life, it makes a difference, and you look at cases with empathy and with concern for the litigants that are before you. But even back in West Virginia, growing up in segregation, Brown versus Board of Education became the law and changed opportunities for us in education in West Virginia back in the late 1960s, because they did not follow Brown versus Board of Education when it was first, the decision was issued. So I bring those personal experiences, and I also bring more than 11 years of experience on the court. I've been on trial court and currently sit on the Court of Appeals in the 10th District in Franklin County, where I am the administrative judge. And I see the little yellow hand, but I am asking for your vote since early vote has started. Thank you.
Well, I'm so pleased that you're both with us. And so what I'm going to do is ask a series of, different questions. In this case, I know folks are always interested in how lawyers are asked to do pro bono work. And the question really is, what kind of pro bono work have you done throughout your career? And how does it tie into your commitment and engagement in your community? And with that, Judge Lisa Forbes.
So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I have really dedicated much of my volunteer time to working with, it's called the Centers, used to be the Centers for Families and Children. That volunteer time has, I think, demonstrated my commitment to my community by, as I said, bringing necessary services to tens of thousands of people every year. The roles that I've played over the course of years at the centers have included, as I said, I'm currently the chair of the board. I oversaw I participated substantially, let's say that. And then as chair of the board, I was in the oversight role. A recent merger that allowed the organization to provide services to adolescents who have literally nowhere else to go. They were sleeping in office buildings. Now they have residential service. They have some place to go where they have a bed and when they are guaranteed meals. And then there are wraparound services available there as well. In addition to my work at the centers, though, I've also assisted with legal aid in providing brief and advice clinics, volunteering my time with the Rights, Responsibilities, and Realities program. That's a teaching program in high schools in Cleveland that addresses constitutional issues. Tries to make provides fundamental civics lessons to students. And also just explain in a very, practical and real world way that the way that courts impact people's lives and their lives going forward. As I said, I've also routinely volunteered with the voter protection programming, really ever since it started in I think it was 2000 or 2002, to try to ensure that people have access to the ballot. And that means being at polling places in a volunteer capacity, working as a voting location manager to ensure that polling days, election days go smoothly. Those are some examples of the types of pro bono activity that I've been involved with over the years.
Well, thank you so much. Now, Judge Jamison, same question. Could you tell us a little bit about the pro bono work that you've done and how it ties into your community and what's important to you?
Thank you for the question. I've been a little bit more hands-on in my pro bono work. I've actually represented individuals in court on a pro bono basis. I also took court-appointed cases for some of the most difficult to deal with defendants when I was in criminal practice. I also serve as a Red Cross Blood Ambassador through my church, the Divine Kingdom Builders. We do a coat and toy drive every year. We do school supplies and backpacks every year. I'm currently on the board of counselors at Capital University Law School, and I serve on the advisory board for global healthcare education at Franklin University. I have also founded a scholarship for single parents at Franklin, the Judge Terri Jamison Scholarship for Single Parents, and that's at Franklin. I've worked with Women to Women, which is a service organization in Franklin County that actually goes in and serves meals at the YWCA Family Shelter. So my hands-on community service is more likely that I have done. I really enjoy working with people and being in their presence. So just seeing the joy that children have on their faces, you passing out toys or passing out coats to children that have none, is just very gratifying to me to know that I'm giving back in a very personal way. Actually, and the last thing that I can think of, I was trying to think of all the different organizations that I serve with. On the National Council of Negro Women, I am part of their political advisory committee that helps them to structure candidate forums and other political events. And I serve in all of the capacities within that organization. I'm also a member of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, and I was able to participate in Push Out, the Criminalization of Black Girls in School documentary that dealt with the disparate impact of school discipline on African American children, particularly girls. So in doing that, I actually have gone to the schools and participate in civics education with them. And last week was just at Northland High School. I've done classroom takeovers where I go in and actually teach a lesson based on the curriculum of what they're doing at that time. The last one that I did was on economics and starting your own business. So I'm very busy. And I was at the family reunion for Berwick Elementary last week and actually working with students there. So I do take a more hands-on approach than just my actual board activities.
Well, thank you. So we're going to switch things up a little bit. And so I'm going to start with you, Judge Jamison. This is not a small question, but this
Okay.
is one that was asked repeatedly because we put this kind of call out for questions. And so this is the question. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice?
Uh, Well, if you would ask a litigant that's standing before the court, I would tell you that they would say finances. They feel that the financial impact to them personally prohibits them sometimes from having a lawyer and sometimes even filing a suit. When I ran in 2022, I asked those questions a lot myself. And one of the questions, the answers that came back to me came from a civil attorney that said there are good cases that sometimes they cannot take because they financially cannot cover the plaintiff's cost to take the case, even though they think it's a good case. So finances actually bar admission to the court for many people. The other thing I think that impacts justice, individuals don't feel that they're going to be treated fairly in the system. And when you look at the disparate sentences, disparate school discipline, disparate impact of the judiciary, the judicial system on individuals, we can see why. We do have the data that shows that African American males get an approximate 19 years longer sentence in those cases. We do have the data that says that disabled and African American children are more disciplined in school. We have the data that shows you're more likely to not get housing if you're GLBTQ or African American or another minority. So we have all the data, but how it can be applied to society so that they know what they're doing. Some people say they don't know, but money bars a lot of people from access to justice.
Well, thank you. So, Judge Forbes, it's the same question. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice?
So that's an interesting, certainly a very interesting question, right? Because it's so broad. It's really a little Rorschach test, I guess, in part. and I'm going to say one of the things that I see as the biggest obstacle to a fully functioning justice system, and I think therefore justice, is this perception of and this reality of the politicization of our court system. And so I would say this is number one on my list right now, is that courts and the role that they play in our democratic society cannot fully function if people do not have confidence in the outcomes. And when people don't have confidence and faith in the outcomes of court cases, then that leads to a kind of a hopelessness and a real jeopardizing of our tripartite system of government that I think that everyone on this call, dare I say, jealously guard. And so I think that that is really of great concern to me. And that is one of the reasons why I am running. As I said at the outset here, I think one of the things that is of great significance, great importance in this day and time is that the Supreme Court act as a firewall to protect our democracy in all of its full functioning. So I guess that's my broadest overarching concern. You did ask, I think, for the greatest obstacle, and I think that is the greatest. But I will also agree with Judge Jamison that I think that as a corollary to my concern about people not having faith in the way that the system works, is this idea that there are demonstrable differences in the way that certain people are treated through the justice system, such as the statistic that she just quoted regarding incarceration rates for African-American males. And I think that the lack of data, the lack of real hard information is of a real obstacle to a fully functioning justice system. Because we should know and understand who's getting incarcerated for what crimes at what rates, so that we can take every measure that we can to address it. So those two go hand in glove, because they all drive back to the same goal of building confidence in the system and people accepting the results. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to read you a quote from a former justice. This is former Justice Paul Pfeiffer. He told the New York Times in 2006, "I never felt so much like a hooker down at the bus stop in any race than I've ever felt in as I did in a judicial race. Everyone interested in contributing has very specific interests." What do you think, and this is to you, Judge Jamison, what do you think that is the impact of money in politics on judicial elections?
I think that Justice Pfeiffer's allegory is quite interesting. I do think that money has become too much of a problem within the elections. If you don't have money, you can't get your message out. If you don't have money, or and it's interesting. In 22 was the first time that I've ever raised a lot of money. I've been elected 3 times in Franklin County, and I think in all 3 elections, my opponents had more money than me. So I think that building trust within your constituents and trust within your community that you are going to be fair, impartial, and independent is more important than raising money. But you do need money to get your message out in a statewide race. I am very independent-minded, and I know that you could not contribute enough money for me to give up my integrity. So I get where he's coming from with and agree with Judge Forbes on the politicization of this position and people having more of an incentive to give you money now because they know that you're politically divided. But I believe that judiciary should remain independent. We should not have party designation that makes people think we're going to rule their way because we have that designation. I'm not inclined to do that. I'm inclined to follow the law, even if the law is not on your side and you're the person that gave the largest donation, you're going to get the ruling that's based on the law. I am not inclined to give up my integrity for that.
Well, thank you. So, Judge Forbes, the same question, and, you can consider, basically money in politics, money in judicial elections, your own race, and it's worth thinking about like dark money as well. So however you want to answer that.
I think that the role that money has come to play in politics is really it's not too great to say that I think it is. It's actually it's a national shame. I wrote my note back in law school. I was on law review, and my note was published. I recently was looking at it because I had a question addressing the supremacy clause, and so I was looking back at my note. All that by way of background. And the opening line of my note from 1991 or 92 was that President Bush had opened the State of the Union that year, talking about the importance of campaign finance reform, and he was calling for the abolition of PACs, the abolition of political action committees. And now look at where we are. I mean, I don't, I honestly can't trace the path to how we got where we are. And it is just a complete mind-numbing set of numbers, the amount of money that gets spent on these elections. $83 million set aside by the Republican Senate Campaign Committee to buy ads in Ohio. $83 million. What could we do with $83 million? Shoring up our bridges, fixing our schools, enhancing the available resources to students. I don't know, Medicaid expansion, like the list goes on and on and on. Prenatal care. It's mind-boggling. And so I'm disturbed by the amount of money and the amount of time that has to be spent fundraising. I'm happy to say that I was outspent in my election, my primary, when I came to the 8th District Court of Appeals by a wide margin, $100,000. My opponent outspent me by, and I won a 4-way primary with 56% of the vote. And that's because I directly communicated with people. And that's what I will do as the nominee in the fall as well. But I think that the impact that it has on me is simply that it divides my time and my attention as a campaigner, but it would not impact the manner in which I do my job. It does not impact how I do my job as a Court of Appeals judge, and it would not impact how I would do my job as a justice on the Ohio Supreme Court. I would apply the law in exactly the same way I do in every case. That is, you look at the briefs of the parties, you look at the law, statutory, regulatory, case law, and you analyze the facts. You look at the evidence that was presented to the trial court, and I would arrive at a decision without regard to any given party, without any kind of favor granted to any side, because that is what I would be sworn to do, is uphold the laws of the state of Ohio.
She's already raised her hand. You got to watch for time.
Thanks so much, Terri.
All right.
I was actually looking down on the bottom because I saw the 2:30 mark.
Worry.
Sorry, I was looking the wrong
spot. So this is actually a decent segue, and Judge Jamison, this is the question: to what extent do you think the court should defer to the legislature?
Never. We are an independent branch of government. We don't defer to the legislature. We interpret the laws that they write. And I think that the independence of the judiciary has been called into question because people feel that the judiciary is deferring to the legislature. when I'm running, and I'm running because we have to have an independent judiciary. We have to have equal justice under the law applied, and we cannot allow the legislature to make decisions about what the court does. The court was granted its own constitutional authority, and we don't defer to the legislature. We do look at legislative intent when they create law, but I don't defer to it. So so my answer is never, because I'm going to look at the case law. I'm going to look at precedent. I'm going to look at legislative intent. But there are always unintended consequences in laws. So there is no reason for us to defer to them when we are called upon as the judiciary to be independent third branch, equal third branch of government. We have no secondary position to them.
And with that, Judge Forbes, what do you think about that question? Should you defer to the Ohio General Assembly?
So it's again, I have to applaud your questions. They're tremendous and very thought-provoking. I would say that as a court, we are indeed by Constitution, the Ohio Supreme Court is an equal branch of government. Deference is not an appropriate, I think, concept in that 3 equal branches of government, tripartite governance. However, when the legislature has spoken and enacted a statute, if the statute is not unconstitutional, the job of the courts is to apply the law. We don't get to say, I don't like it, like the legislators we're hearing down in Columbus these days saying, well, they don't like the constitutional amendment, so they're just not going to apply it. If a law isn't unconstitutional, whether I disagree with the policy behind it or not, I have to apply it. Where courts really get to impact the laws is in how common law, that is the judge-made law, nudges the law, the way common law and the interpretation of ambiguous statutes, how judges do that interpretation to move the law, to bring clarity to the law, to address unanticipated consequences or circumstances that arise. There's always these, I call them tweeners. There's always these tweeners that come up where the statute says this pretty clearly, but the situation presented in the case is just a little bit left of center. How do you use the statute then? That's where the real magic of the common law and what we judges can do comes into play. And so as a co-equal branch of the government, I certainly do appreciate the role and importance of courts in not small part in reviewing and analyzing the constitutionality of statutes. I think that is of vital significance, not surprisingly. But actually, I'm happy to say, as a Court of Appeals judge, I've had the opportunity to do that, and I was, it's really heady stuff. That is really probably the penultimate in importance of what the courts do. But in terms of taking a back seat to the legislature, absolutely not. The court is, as I said, a co-equal branch that's really not subject to debate.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to ask you this question. So you probably know I care a lot about transparency, and I find one of the things that's really hard with the courts is not understanding what's happening there. There feels like there's a lack of transparency. Could you talk, Judge Forbes, a little bit about, how you see the role of transparency in the courts, and what are the kinds of things that we could do to create a more transparent judicial system?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important in terms of transparency in the way in which I make decisions is I try to be meticulous in providing a fulsome explanation for how it is that I arrive at the outcome in any given case. And that's not necessarily true in how everybody approaches the job. It is how I approach the job. And I don't want to simply speak to the lawyers that are litigating the case for their clients. I want to speak to the parties. I want to speak to the defendants so that they can understand the reasons that their appeal is either being denied or granted. That is one aspect to transparency that I have a lot of control over, and I work very hard at that. The transparency in my decision-making process. The second aspect in transparency, I think, is the manner in which judges decide whether to hear a matter or not. I'm not talking about the discretion to choose to hear a question or not. We as Court of Appeals judges have to hear everything that is brought to the court. But what I'm talking about is what do I recuse myself from? What is a situation where the interest of justice and the interest of people's sense of confidence in and the integrity of the process would mandate that I step aside, that I recuse myself. And I think one of the things that can be done and should be done is we should all have recusal lists for people that we have close relations with, whether there's a financial relationship or not. It seems to me that close family members, my rule for myself, my husband's a lawyer, close family members, dear friends, I do not hear cases that they are involved with. My best friend is a lawyer. She's on my recusal list, as is her entire firm, because I don't want there to be any appearance of impropriety in any decision coming out of my court, not just out of my chambers. And I think that idea about the breadth of recusals should be embraced by more people. So I guess I'll stop there. Those are two ways in which I think the transparency can be improved, and in which I attempt to be as transparent as possible.
And Judge Jamison, could you talk a little bit about transparency and the court, your court, and the Ohio Supreme Court?
Well, Catherine, when I think of transparency, I think about the public being able to see how many cases came through the court, how judges ruled on cases. I think of a criminal sentencing database. And as I've said, I think there should be a civil database as well that gives us an inside look at how courts are handling civil matters and who gets those judgments. And when you look at all of the disparities that we have socioeconomically, by race, religion, ethnicity, by sexual orientation, you will find that there are disparities across all of those lines. Having represented litigants actually in court, I've seen litigants treated differently by different judges. I've seen litigants treated differently in administrative hearings. And until you actually collect data and you hold people accountable with the data that you have, and you hold them accountable in elections. Without that data, you don't know how these individuals are handling cases. So when I think of transparency, I agree with Judge Forbes. I have a flag list at the court for people that I don't hear. I have practices that I maintain myself for integrity. But in the domestic and juvenile court in Franklin County, we issue a report every year of what the budget spending was, what it went to. That's another type of transparency that a lot of courts do not issue. I think that the public has a right to know how much money is spent when it's public funding. I don't care if it's going to the Super Bowl game or if it's funding for programs in the community. We also need to have transparency as to sentencing and to civil judgments that come out of courts, especially if they're tried to the bench and not to a jury. It lets you know the leanings of different judges. So I think that we need transparency in a number of areas.
Well, thank you. And so Judge Forbes, this is another one of those biggies. What is the court's role in ensuring access to justice for all?
I think that the court's role is, I think that the role of the courts, and this is going to be different depending on which level of court we're talking about, to ensure access to justice for all. I think that what is essential, what is critical, is first something that applies to all courts across the board, and that's who people elect. I think that it is important that the people who are elected to the bench, that the people have an opportunity to do things like this, get to know and see people's core values, to understand who it is that they're putting on the bench. The role of judges in ensuring access to justice for all, I say it's a little different depending on what branch you're in, because trial courts, one of the most important things that a trial judge and a trial court can do and must do is to ensure that their dockets are moving forward, appropriately, so that everybody is having their cases heard in a timely fashion. There's a saying that is, justice delayed is justice denied. It's important that cases move forward efficiently and effectively. Ways in which the court system, and that's different than for courts of appeals, at least the way we run our court of appeals. We have we keep our dockets rolling. We have mandatory timeframes that we maintain. With regard to the Supreme Court, though, there again is discretion. And access for all in the Supreme Court, I think that comes through in the manner in which the Supreme Court decides how to take discretionary cases. The court really, in any given year, hears approximately 5% of the cases that it is asked to hear. And that is a place where increasing access to justice, it's an obvious and easy target. If more cases are considered to be of public or great general interest, that is the test, the standard that's applied based on the Ohio Constitution. That public or great general interest is a pretty broad category. And I think to the extent possible, we should have a wide filter, not a narrow one, more like a colander, less like a sieve. And so that is one. So looking at the three different branches of government, I think that the manner in which we call juries is something that the court system in general also can look at, needs to look at, must look at, and must be attended to, so that the jury pool truly resembles the community. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So Judge Jamison, this is the biggie. How do we ensure access to justice for all?
Well, I can speak to this from two different perspectives. From the trial court, one of the perspectives is making sure that you have interpreters for individuals that English is their second language or may not speak English at all. Having documents translated into Spanish and Somali was a big thing for our court because of the number of the population. So that increases access. Having, access to the law library, having access to the forms that the Supreme Court came up with and had drafted and put online to make sure that people that could not afford counsel could pull those forms and at least get their case started. So when you talk about it from a trial court aspect, I think of access, those access needs in particular. Having one thing that we talked about in Franklin County that has not come to fruition so that we could increase jury service for mothers was having a daycare at the court so that mothers would be able to come and do their jury duty without having to pay for childcare. There's a lot of things that hamper access to justice. But when I think about it on the Supreme Court level, I look at the decline in the number of criminal cases they're hearing. I look at their right to vote on whether or not cases are actually heard. What they may not consider of great general importance may be of great general importance to the public. And when you have I don't want to a monogenous a bench that is not diverse in culture as well as in education and training, you may not see a great public interest when you're voting on a case that someone might be able to educate you about. Because I worked in such a large court with so much diversity, I think about these things when I think about access. It's not about color, it's not about race, it's about culture in many ways.
Thank you. 2024, and I still can't get off mute easily. With that, I am going to invite Maria Bruno, who is the Policy Director for Equality Ohio, and Sabrina Jordan, who is the founder and CEO of OFUPAC, to come. And what they're going to do is ask some questions that our participants in today's forum have. And with that, Maria, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. Sorry, I thought I was going to send them to you, so I'm not prepared to be on camera, but thank you both for joining us. I would like to ask about the party designation on the judicial candidate ballots. Do you believe that that has been a net good, bad, or is irrelevant to building an independent judiciary? And I will start with you, Judge Jamison.
Well, having been on the 2022 ballot and the first election after the party designation, I would say no. I would have said no if I wasn't on that ballot. I think the politicization of our courts has led to the demise of many good jurists. We've had jurists on the appellate level that have decided not to run, depending on what county they were in, based on their party designation, and we lose a wealth of knowledge when that happens. It also makes our litigants prejudge the position that we're going to take when they come to court. They automatically assume if you're Democrat, you believe one way, if you're Republican, you believe the other, and that might not be true. But because there's a party designation there, they're going to assume that it is. And as I always say, a person's assumption of the reality is the reality for them. And when you put a party designation, you are leading people to believe that that person is going to follow the party that they are endorsed by or run under. Whatever flag you're flying, they think you're going to follow it. But that's not necessarily true. But the appearance of impropriety that it creates and the lack of trust in the judiciary that it creates is very problematic in these days.
Thank you. And Judge Forbes?
Yeah, I am adamantly opposed to it. I think that the appearance of party affiliation on the ballots encourages people to vote not based on who is the most qualified or most likely to do the job in the dispassionate manner in which it was intended, that would bring about the greatest sense of justice. But they're just turning it into it's really just a crass attempt to try to turn the courts into another representative legislative body. And that is not what the courts are for. That is not what the courts do. And I am concerned about the idea somehow that there's this shorthand that whoever is of whatever party, you're going to end up with an outcome. I mean, look at the decision from the United States Supreme Court today. The Democratic appointees voted along with the Republican appointees to say that, sorry, Colorado, we disagree that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution bars Donald Trump from being on the ballot. Like that decision or don't like that decision, it wasn't a political decision based on party affiliation. That is a and so I wish more thought was given to those circumstances. I wish more was highlighted into those circumstances rather than driving this effort to drive the courts into these political actor roles. So I think it's negative. I think it's very bad because it encourages people not to believe that the outcome of a case was inspired by a careful analysis of the law or a reasoned application of the law to the facts, but rather was the result of some political affiliation that some judge had. And I think that degrades confidence in the entire system, and that undermines the entire democracy. I do not think that is too big of a statement. And I certainly hope that we can get party affiliation off the ballots in the future. Not something for judges to do, something the legislature has to do, but hopefully we can persuade them.
And Sabrina or Maria, do you have a question, another question you'd like to ask?
Hi, yes. Joanne Greer would like to know, why are there more women than men?
Where? Because there are not more female judges than male judges in Ohio.
I think that was a follow-up to a specific question. Sabrina,
Oh,
is it all
okay.
right if I pick another one?
Yes.
Okay,
I
great.
didn't understand that question.
No,
so I'm
no
sorry
worries
if I
at
answered
all.
the wrong one.
No, no, it was no worries at all. So this is something that I'm particularly passionate about given recent events in Ohio's history. What are your thoughts on legislators, or let's just say statewide officials? How do you believe that those folks should be handled if they do not follow a Supreme Court ruling and ignore the law? And I will start with Judge Forbes this time.
Okay. And when you say if they do not follow the law, can I
Follow
ask
a
follow-up?
Supreme Court ruling. For example, let's say hypothetically, there might be a redistricting issue that is in front of the court, just as a totally plucked out of the sky example.
Okay. Yeah, I think that this is, like so many things for we judicial candidates, it's difficult to say in advance how any particular situation should be or would be handled hypothetically in anticipation of a future event. I think that when I have talked about now a couple of times the importance of the Supreme Court serving as this firewall, and the importance of the community as a whole having confidence and faith in the role that the court is playing. I think when you have co-equal branches of the government disregarding clear Supreme Court statements, it is very damaging to law and order, period, end. And how best to address that? Well, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army. That's a true statement. However, the citizens of Ohio, the voters of Ohio, are a citizens' army. And what I think is an effective tool is to activate that citizens' army. This is where the power of the vote makes all the difference. When people don't follow the Supreme Court, when legislators don't follow the Supreme Court, the people of the state of Ohio can vote them out. The people of the state of Ohio, that army of citizens, can change the Constitution. We know they can. We've seen you do it. And that is in our system, I think the most effective response as a specific member of the Supreme Court, I think the tools available to me as a general statement are to use the bully pulpit and to try to, or will be to use the bully pulpit and to try to activate that citizen army, that army of voters to bring about that change.
Thank you. And Judge Jamison?
Well, having known the power of the contempt in the trial court, when someone doesn't follow a court order and they're an ordinary citizen and a contempt motion is before the court makes a finding by clear and convincing evidence whether or not the individual has followed the court order, or if there was an impossibility or some defense that they have to not following the court order. The reason they were not held in contempt when the contempt was actually filed in the Supreme Court was because it takes 4 votes of the 7 justices to get a contempt finding. And that didn't occur before they went to federal court to file for federal court intervention. But the Supreme Court absolutely has the power to find someone in contempt, but you do need 4 of the 7 justices at a minimum to agree to do that. So we need to hold people to the same standard that we hold the ordinary citizen. If an ordinary citizen does not follow a court order and you find them in contempt, you give them an opportunity to purge the contempt by following the court order. You bring it back for a review to see if they've done that. If they don't, you put them in jail. And when we allow ordinary citizens to be incarcerated for failure to follow a court order, and we don't do the same thing to someone else, we have now created a situation where they are getting special treatment. Again, equal justice must apply to everyone. And you do not get to avoid following court orders because you hold a title. And that is how I feel about anyone that comes to court. You avail yourself of the court, you need to follow the court's instructions and orders as they are given.
Well, I have to say thank you to the 2 judges who've joined us today so that we had an opportunity to learn more about you. I did want to give each of you a minute, basically to make another pitch, share your website, so that people can do a little bit more diving in and before they go to the polls or start working on voting by mail. And with that, Judge Jamison.
Thank you to everyone that attended tonight. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to speak to you and to speak about this really important subject and why you need someone that has experience on this court. It is imperative that you elect someone that you can trust, that has the knowledge and the wherewithal to stand independently. I have been on trial court and I've been on the appellate court for a combined total of more than 11 years. I have been trusted by the Ohio Democratic Party to run in 22 as their endorsed candidate, although they decided not to go that way this year. However, I still have more than 3 times the experience as a judge as my opponent. I have been endorsed by a number of people across the state. I'm asking you to vote the judge you know and vote the judge you trust. Vote Jamison for justice.
Thank you. And Judge Forbes.
All right, well, thank you all so much for this, just a tremendous evening. The rigorous questions, certainly challenging, and it's invigorating to see so many people so engaged and interested in our court system. Thank you all for all that you do to make our democracy strong here in Ohio. I want to do my part to make sure that the Supreme Court serves as that effective firewall to protect our democracy, to protect the rule of law for all Ohioans. I want to bring my hard work, my expertise, as the Cleveland Plain Dealer noted in endorsing me. I'm steeped in the law, 30 years as a lawyer, and I want to bring my hard work to benefit all Ohioans with equal application of and access to the law and the courts. So thank you again. I very much appreciate it, and I hope I can earn your support in the primary and move on to the general as well. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Well, we are so fortunate to have the opportunity to vote for either of these remarkable women. Now, I did want to highlight, sometimes people worry about voter registration, and as long as you are registered to vote, when it comes to voting in the primary, what you need to do is select the party that you want to vote for and ask for the ballot on election day, or to request it in your vote by mail, or when you go to early vote, you say Democrat or Republican. Just want to make sure that that is an obstacle that's out of the way. And then the next thing that I wanted to highlight, are some of the things that we all should be thinking about. One, March 12th is coming up very soon. That is the last day to request an absentee ballot. If you want to vote by mail, do not wait. The mail can move slowly. Take care of that right away. It's important to realize that the deadline, to postmark is March 18th. That's the day before the election. It's also important we no longer have early in-person vote on the day before the election. So that's also important. And then, get to the polls if you're voting on election day from 6:30 to 7:30. And you can get all sorts of good information from the Secretary of State's website, the voteohio.gov. And then I would highly encourage you can call and text the election protection hotline if you run into any problems. I also wanted to highlight some resources for you so that you have those. First of all, there's this wonderful resource that we can all go to, which is called judicialvotescount.org. It's a project of the Ohio State Bar Association. And, what you can do there is you can look not just at these candidates, but all the judicial candidates that provide information about themselves, written statements about themselves. This is an opportunity for those folks are wanting to do some research. It can be complicated figuring out who to vote for when it comes to judges. And this is a good resource. The Vote 411, many of us are familiar with the League of Women Voters site. I highly encourage you to do that. The other thing is, go check out, the Supreme Court site. I think it's worth thinking about, well, what do they exactly do? How does this work? What are the cases? You can look at opinions so that you can look at the folks that are on the court and say, okay, I see this, I see that. The other thing I wanted to highlight is a project that Common Cause Ohio and the Ohio Fair Courts Alliance has been doing. It's called judgetheads.org. And there you can see the ads, and you can also do your best. We do our best to follow the money. One of the things we're trying to do is just highlight how difficult it is to follow the money. So this is a project that's trying to give folks tools so that they can look and consider who's paying for the ads and look at the political advertisements. But it's really important as we think about the judicial system to think about the role of money in politics. And then I really wanted to highlight the Brenna Center for Justice has this really good report. One of the things that is really interesting, Ohio had the most spending it had ever had in an Ohio Supreme Court election in 2022. They also have this thing called buying time. And with buying time, you can look at political ads in all those states that have state Supreme Court races. And it's well worth checking that out and kind of thinking about, well, what's the role of money? What are the role of political advertisements? How is it that we can better select our judges, elect our judges, so that we have a judiciary that works for all of us? And with that, I wanted to do a really big thank you to all of the co-sponsors, and a big thank you to Judge Terri Jamison, who is running for Ohio Supreme Court. She's facing off with Judge Lisa Forbes. And I just want us all to make sure that we spend a little time researching and getting ready so that we can cast a ballot. And a big thank you to all of our co-sponsors. And as a final note, I want to make sure that you know we'll be sending you a recording. We'll also send you the resources so that you have those links. You know, if you didn't quickly take a note, we'll send those off to you as well. And then once again, a big thank you to Judge Forbes, a big thank you to Judge Jamison. And with that, a good night all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you for being
Don't
here.
forget to vote, everybody. Don't
Make
forget.
sure you vote.
Thank you both.
Have a great night.
You too.
Good